Hey everyone, I'm Peter Barron. Welcome to today's Moonshot Podcast. I am thrilled to have Andreas Marinopoulos with me today. Andrea and I met, I don't know, maybe like 7-8 years ago. I can't remember. He was doing digital marketing work with independent schools, and ultimately has now founded a organization called Brilliant Microschools, which is it's the model behind it is fascinating, which is why I wanted to dig into it today, and also just to catch up with Andreas. It's been a long, long time. But before we get into that, Andreas, welcome to the podcast.
Peter, thank you so much for having me. It's great to catch up.
Yeah, my pleasure. And before we get going, if folks aren't familiar with you and your past work in independent schools, can you share a little bit about yourself and Brilliant Microschools?
Of course. Give a little bit of a backstory, and then you can dig in more if you want. So I'm Greek by origin. Spent a while in a very different industry, manufacturing. Strange. We were kind of flying around the different manufacturing plants and suit and tie and doing operations. It is relevant because it informed a lot of how we structure, like operate things later on in life. So at some point, my brother and I, we had enough of the corporate world. We left, and we initially founded a startup, a business which didn't do well. It was a bad idea, and however, through trial and error, we shifted around, tested different things, and ended up with a model that really worked. And that's where we met. It was a growth agency for schools, very different from where we started. This is constant iteration, and we were helping schools grow in different ways, in digital marketing, positioning, things like that. And it did really well. We ended up working with about 1,000 schools, independent schools, but other types of schools as well, many different types around the country. And what we did was, using also some of the manufacturing principles, we were able to design a lot of different marketing experiences very fast, lots of variations, lots of iterations. So schools love that because they could, iterate a lot and kind of see different things. And that's, I think, what they liked about it. And it was affordable too because we streamlined everything quite a bit. We ended up selling that business to Schoolmint, which I think it's a better home. Frankly, they're wrapping it into all their other enrollment marketing software and services, and it's doing really great there. And then we decided to found our school, Brilliant Microschools. It's a virtual collective of microschools, again, serving students around the country with certified teachers. And we're focusing on students who learn differently. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, I'm curious. So I want to dig into Brilliant Microschools for sure. But before we do that, you had mentioned that you'd taken some of these operational principles that you had picked up along the way and were able to apply them to the work that you did with schools before you transitioned over to running a school. What were some of those principles?
That's a great question. I think the first one, just, to give it a bit of order, I'm going to start with, the beginning, the customer. And we call them custom. We called our schools customers. And they were like, is that a good word for the education? Especially in independent schools, they were a bit uneasy with the word, but we're quite intentional with that. And I remember on a podcast I used to run then for Enroll Hand, talking to different people in the education space, thought leaders. One person who really I really hit it off with was Grant Lichtman, which you know well as well. We discussed this. And he was thinking of schools as customers, value propositions, things like that. So to answer your question, I'd say the first thing is looking at the customer and really kind of thinking and listening to what they really want. This concept of jobs to be done. What does a customer want? Whether your customer is a student and family, which in your audience, and in my case right now, it's the family. But back then it was the school when I was running my brother and I were running the growth agency. So what do they really want? And you have to listen. You have to also read between the lines because sometimes they don't tell you exactly what they want. And then start with that, and then in manufacturing, you have this concept of value stream mapping. So map the value stream, like where are you generating value that the customer really does want to pay for? Like if you ask them directly, do they really want to pay for a 40-page enrollment agreement for you to generate and maintain and upkeep that? Is that something, if you ask them, you have to pay this amount for this agreement, would they? Probably not. Like, so can you reduce that? What does it mean when you reduce that? And that concept of value stream mapping is a very key concept that comes from manufacturing, because we used to do that on all the manufacturing lines.
So just this principle of optimization is what is that fair?
It's a concept. It's maybe two concepts: optimization, but also continuous improvement, because you can't do it in one go. You have to go back at it again and again and kind of chip away. Stripping down something, it sounds bad. Sounds like you're cheapening. It's actually very liberating, and it's actually very value-adding. There's this image now. Everyone's talking about the SpaceX, with the rockets. We see this image of how they design different components of the rockets, and the initial design very complex, and then the end design was very streamlined, and it's kind of pretty because it's extremely minimal. So that stripping away gradually, and like optimizing with also continuous improvement, I'd say.
Yeah, I talk a lot about adopting an iterative mindset, right?
Yeah,
and every day get 1% better, a little bit better each and every day. Yeah.
That's very important.
So I'm sure this is going to come up as we talk about Brilliant Microschools. I'm sure we'll dig into this a little bit deeper, but so I'm super curious. So you ran this very successful digital marketing firm called Enrolled Hand, sold it to Schoolment, and now all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to start a school. So I'm curious, like, what's the story there? I'd love to learn more.
Yeah, so I think it was a gradual story. So my brother and I, we used to visit a lot of the schools we work with, and we used to see different things. We're very impressed with many of the schools and the teams there. They're doing amazing work, and sometimes we'd also share experiences from one school to the next. I think the frustrating thing we had felt when we were running Enroll Hand is that there are a number of things, for example, that we see in one school and tell another school, hey, this is what you should do. This is a great idea. It would really suit you. But we couldn't really convince them. If they had other priorities, of course, they had their own vision. They had a vision. So it was not our vision. We were really just consulting them, right? So there was this one case, we were visiting a school in Houston. We'd worked really, really hard with them for a long time. It was a really great school, a great team. The founder of the school and the head of school was, a pillar of the community. And we were implementing in a lot of things which should have worked because, you start to have some playbook. So if I do this, you know what will work and how much it should work. But if nothing wasn't working as it should have. So we didn't really know why. We were spending extra time, more time than we should. And then we went and visited, and the building hadn't been painted in I don't know how many years. It was paint chipping. The team was great inside. The students were happy, but the building was looked really bad. So obviously, anyone who drove by saw this building, which looked really bad, and that's a moment where it hit us that, if this school were ours, we would have painted the building. So we got this urge to do the whole thing. There's this concept which comes from the startup world, and they say, if you do something well, a part of the value proposition really well, you should try and own the whole stack. So, for example, if you're a phone battery manufacturer and you create a great battery, you should actually try and create a new phone. So that feeling kind of crept up over the years that we're really happy with what we're doing, but we actually wanted to try and do the whole thing. And we had gained, we aren't the educators, we had gained a lot of experience through helping all these very diverse schools, from tiny, micro schools or Montessori schools to large districts, independent schools. So we had a lot of. So we said, it was quite a smooth process actually, gradual process of desire that came to us.
How did you what did that roadmap look like for you?
To actually build the school?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Again, another startup idea is an idea called the minimum viable product. So again, starting with what do your customers want? So what do, in this case, families want? So we had assumptions, but we weren't sure. Even though we'd interacted with, I don't even know the number of families, because in all hand we actually handled also first level discussion with potential families for our schools. So texting, phone calls, and emails before then scheduling calls for the admissions team. So we had a lot of experience talking to families, but still we just had assumptions. So the first thing we did, we had certain skills in enrollment. We had skills in recruiting, because we were also providing recruiting services at Enrollment. It was a side. It was not the core service, but it was something we did. So we had a lot of experience there. We weren't educators though. So what we did was we hired some really great teachers, and then we actually started building a tutoring business, even though we wanted to build a school. And the reason is, again, that minimum viable product. So if you Google that, you see an image where, if you say you want to build a car, the first thing you do is not to build a wheel. You build, in the image, they build a skateboard, then a bicycle, then a car. That concept of really find that sliver, what are you trying to do? You're trying to move from one place to the other. That's the value proposition, right? So, build the skateboard first. So we built the tutoring company, because we're thinking of our skills like recruiting, enrollment, and we built that. It was in the pandemic, so it went really well. And then gradually we're listening to our customers. What did they want? And then they started wanting kind of homeschool support, because a lot of them were at home. Some of them were in public schools. They didn't like what they were experiencing there, so they wanted some extra support, did things at home. So we started providing that. I think gradually that started turning into a school.
So what year did you start the school?
The school or the tutoring?
I just love to know. So you started the tutoring, and then
the tutoring was in 2020 and 2019, 2020. And the school actually officially started in the summer of 2021.
Okay, so you're 3 years. Three years old. Yeah. And I mentioned that because there's some interesting, just the way you've grown enrollment over that 3 years is mind blowing to me. But before we get there, and I'm a big believer in MVPs too. That's how I built my business. I've done small things to kind of prove out the next step and so on and so forth. And I think that's something schools can certainly do too, in terms of programs, or, it's not a purely for-profit business tool. I mean, it's applicable to just about anything. So you proved it out with your tutoring company that there's demand. You listened to your customers to understand some of the pains that they were feeling, and you developed what you consider you developed effectively a product or a school that could answer some of those challenges and provide support. But were there any, as you're starting this up, transitioning from tutoring to school, were there challenges that you faced? What were some of the things that you had to contend with?
Yeah, of course, there are many challenges. There are always challenges. I think one thing I would say, and then I can kind of list maybe some of the challenges that helps address challenges, was really taking it one step at a time. I think one thing we used to do, we didn't used to do very well, was try and do a lot of things at once. Whereas saying no to anything that isn't really necessary to do right now, I think is extremely important. So, for example, we started with the tutoring. We already were saying no to starting a full school right away. Then, we started providing homeschool support. It wasn't a school yet. So you can imagine like providing support to a small group of 6 students first. They had feedback, they had concerns, they had some things they liked, some things they didn't like. Iterate, do it better. As soon as they start really loving what you're doing, then expand it. Listen to them again, talk to them again. Then, okay, it's going well, expand it further, enrich it further. What else can we do? Then we're starting like adding things, but maybe half of the things we're adding, maybe new programs, new learning experiences, maybe half of things are not interesting or they're not happy with. So we quite fast, we cancel what we just added. Maybe we even worked night and day to create that thing. We don't hold it too dear. We cancel it if it's not nice. It's not what they wanted. If you're iterating that, you also get a feeling for what your customer wants. So your success rate improves gradually. So that's, I think, how it happens. And then it compounds because if you're recruiting great people, if you're satisfying your customers, they speak about you, and then you get more customers, you get more great people, then it's easier to work because you have a team that works with you and for you. Then, to really become a school, we got accredited, but also that wasn't extremely hard. Obviously, there were challenges, but a lot of the things the accreditors wanted, we were already doing because we were doing them for the right reason. So we had standards aligned curriculum. We had, because, as a parent, actually, homeschooler needed, some documents to share with their district. So we had created that, we had portfolios. Again, another parent needed that. So a lot of the things had come around naturally, but I want to say, saying no and taking step by step. So we only went for accreditation when we already saw that a lot of the things were already in place. And then if you do it like that, just put one step in front of the other, it's certainly quite fast. You can go fast. Whereas if you're doing a lot of things at the same time, it really slows down a lot.
Yeah, I hear two things there, and I think they're really important. One is you were very focused on priorities, right?
Yes.
So one of your priorities was one thing at a time, iterative growth. If it doesn't work, retire it and just keep going forward. But the other thing that I'm hearing, and I think this is one of the reasons, Andreas, why I'm so excited to have you on the show, is that, I talk a lot with schools about the constraints that we have with the current business model that supports independent schools. And over the past, we're recording this end of October 2024. I've been on the road a lot since September, have spoken with countless heads of school. I don't even know at this point. It's been so many. And this feeling of what do I do? We feel like our hands are tied in terms of the model, is prevalent. And I get it, right? You're in the weeds, you're doing the day to day. It's really, really tough. But what I'm hearing from you is start small, iterate, build up, essentially muscle memory so that it becomes just part of who you are. And, a year later, if you can stick to that routine and build over time, you're going to see change. You're going to actually be able to witness, oh, I have tweaked this or I have done that. And I think that's just such a liberating concept because oftentimes we look at the entirety of the challenge we're trying to overcome and you're like, I can't, it's just too much. It's just too much.
I think that's very much true. One additional point, which as we're building from scratch, it's not as hard for us as some of the independent schools. It's harder for them.
Right. Sure.
Is that, I mentioned this case where we built something, we offered it, it wasn't what they wanted, so we killed it. That was not so hard for us because it was, a little thing, every time. But for independent school, it's harder. Often there are programs that have been there for decades. but maybe some of them or some things or some routines, some parts of the school calendar are not as valuable anymore for the customer. So maybe, and I'm not sure, it's very case by case, by working with the customer, working with the families, you could maybe say, okay, this program, this maybe, I'm not talking about really, reducing the offerings in the parent schools, but maybe in certain areas you could liberate funds and then invest them right away into things that are more value added.
I agree. And I think, one of the things that I think independent schools are very focused right now on servicing, being competitive in the market. We've got micro schools and public schools and charter schools. Like the competitive landscape is just so much, more complex than it was even 10 years ago, let alone. And, so what we've done in many cases, we've been adding programs, but not necessarily retiring ones that are no longer serving. So there's this like piling effect that happens. And what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like, sometimes you just need to stop, assess what you've got, find the programs that maybe just are either underperforming or not needed anymore, or the families aren't necessarily, participating in, and be okay with retiring those, knowing that you're going to invest in other things to help propel the school forward.
Yes. And I think it starts again with listening to the customer, because you can't be everything to everyone. You have to decide where you want to play. And if you're trying to play across the field, you're going to be stretched thin. And just to mirror that with our experience, as we were heading into the market, first as a tutoring company, then as a homeschool support group, initially we thought, okay, we're there to support homeschoolers. That's our thing, right? Because there's a lot of homeschoolers, it's an increasing market, so that's our thing. As we're observing the market, and we were growing, in a board meeting, our principal said, actually, you know what? I've seen quite a few neurodivergent students join us lately. We weren't intentionally supporting that student group, the student population. But then it hit us, and then we did some analysis, and we talked to them. First thing we did, talk to them. And it did seem that actually our school format was very popular and very adapted for them. So we actually stripped away some of the things we were doing for homeschoolers, which we just built, and then added, things that are especially good for neurodivergent students. We added like multi-tiered systems support. We added afternoon, executive functions or social emotional learning workshops, things like that. But we had to retire some things to provide the funds and people and resources to add these other things. And that really, really helped us. We really saw a lift when we did that. And it was stripping away and investing. And we actually made a hard choice of not playing in a certain section of the market and actually shifting to another part of the market. And it's counterintuitive, but that led to so much growth that now we also serve, we also were able to add lots of support for homeschoolers as well, but you had to take that detour and that focus.
And so that actually leads me to my next question. I mean, now you're a fully accredited school serving is it over 1,200 kids or is 1,200 students?
It's about 1,200 at the moment. It's growing, it's dynamic, but that's the correct number, yeah.
So you're sitting at 1,200 students in the span of 3 years. I think you talked a little bit about like finding your niche and kind of leaning into it and being the best at that work. What else can you say about that growth? Because that's really, I consider that hyper growth in the span of like, independent fee-based schools.
Yeah, I think there's no secret sauce. We did have some, specific skills in enrollment due to our previous life, which maybe were above par. But I think it's really a commitment to being rigorous, to prioritizing. I would say, if I had to attribute it somewhere, it's that it's amazing how it's hard to describe. If you prioritize and you focus your resources, how it starts compounding, and then you can go faster. Like it is there's a saying like move slow to move fast, but it's really hard to to explain how that translates very, very well into managing an organization in a school. I think the real growth came when we positioned ourselves specifically, how that niche, that kind of defining our niche really, really made that difference, I believe. And yeah, I think it's just then it's compounding. It's listening to the customer, what they want, defining more things. So currently all our curriculum has been redesigned by special education teachers to be well fitted for online learning and for students, with ADHD, dyslexia, anxiety. There's like a strong component of the learning model on social emotional learning. And that's again because of that. So everything's been designed for this niche. And again, it's this process of stripping away, adding, really in a rigorous fashion. I think that's unfortunately all the tricks. There isn't much more that I could share. I could, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I mean, what I could share more examples of how we are really serving this specific market. For example, there's many, many little examples, many little things. For example, our students, they have very, very jagged profiles, more than your average student. They would have highly different educational needs. Some might be really advanced in some areas, in some subjects or some parts of subjects, but 3, 4, 5 grade levels behind in others. So we've really focused on how to differentiate in the classroom, taking it to an extreme, like providing very much training to our teachers, providing a lot of resources, kind of identifying specific, quite innovative teaching methods with explore boards and protocols and protocol boards, and combining things like that. Different members of our team are working on different things in these areas, all focused in kind of the same direction. But there's many, many little things like that. And it's that process of chipping away and adding that continuous improvement. For example, math, we have to really make it fun because it's really hard to engage our students in math. So we're trying different things, and one thing really clicked. It's a concept called 3-act math. It's rather new, works really well for our students. It won't really necessarily work for everyone. But there's really these engaging, authentic, complex tasks that aren't very age-specific or standard-specific. They're complex. They have they address a lot of math standards at once. And they're fun. You might have a question like, will the hoop land in the net? And there's video, but there's a strategy to how you go about it. And you can teach quadratic equations. You can teach many things with this kind of specific math task. And it's about basketball. And there's many things like that. So little things like that. People are kind of finding things, testing things. What works, we expand. I think that's really what's led to the growth.
How do you culturally set the expectation that iterative approach is expected of everybody inside of the org? I'm curious.
That's a good question. I don't know that we set a strong expectation. It's not like it's setting a strong example. As again, it's compounding as you have one of the first hires in the team, so was really kind of absorbed and also set the culture, is our principal. Other early hires are also kind of leading members of the team. So it's leading by example in many cases. It's giving a lot of support, unconditional support. So a lot of our teachers joke when they come to our school that they were talking about this thing called B&M trauma. I didn't know what they were talking about. It's brick and mortar trauma. So, the one of the, and it's probably mostly in public schools, not so much in independent schools, but there's the stereotype is that they have these very detailed lesson plans, and they have to with trembling hands submit for approval, and then they get approved, and they can teach the lesson plans. But if someone comes in and they're not doing it right, they might get reprimanded or expelled, or in very, very rigid, strict thing. Whereas we provide unconditional support, we ask them to fail. And as long as they're doing their best, failing is celebrated. So they try things out. And I think, then you might say, well, how come, how do you allow them to fail with little kids, students? Aren't you ashamed of, using testing or testing different approaches on your students? And I'd say no, actually. Actually, we've really been able to support our students this way, much better than otherwise, because we're really finding the best solutions to engage them. We think it's our role. It's our job to engage them. It's not their job to learn. We're competing with Netflix and Roblox and all the things and Instagram that they are engaged with. We need to kind of get their attention. It's our job, not theirs. So I think, to answer your question on how do you set the expectation, I think it's actually leading by example on the one hand, and then giving unconditional support and allowing them and asking them to fail.
I imagine, this has been like a central pillar of your organization since you started, right? So like you said, I think you used the word compound. I imagine it does compound over time.
It does.
Hey, just a couple more questions as we start to wrap. One of the things I find fascinating is that your tuition is very accessible, and I know that's central to your mission. How do you balance that with, the quality of education that you offer?
One thing is we continuously look for waste, things that we can strip away and refine. We also have a software team, which is quite unique for schools, where again, like when we find things that we can automate, we automate a little thing. So we take away from the teachers anything we can that is not adding value to the students. So they're not doing paperwork, they're not filling out IEP documents, they're not doing a lot of that stuff. It's really their teaching. Then, I think it's also a stance of we are mission driven. So we are very intentionally keeping tuition low, and we really want to continue doing that. We did have to increase tuition a little bit last year. This is extremely low. And that means, the whole, even if it's a business, it's the profitability is there, but it's intentionally kept low. And we just do what it takes to keep it that way. Obviously, being online is also, helps. You don't have building, utilities, all that stuff. That helps. If it was a physical school, that wouldn't be that easy to keep it that way. But it's just this intention, and then trying to really streamline everything we can so that we're focused on the learning, and then we don't have a lot of things that aren't related to the learning.
So what's next for Brilliant Microschools? I mean, do you plan to continue to grow enrollment? What do you see in the future?
I'd say, the actual growth, the size of the student body is not a metric we focus on. It's a good metric. This concept of a leading metric or a lagging metric. It's a lagging metric. I think if it grows, it's a signal that we're doing a good job. We're increasing our impact. Our students are happy. I think we are focused on family engagement. We do survey our families twice a year when they do their student-to-teacher conferences. When the families book their conferences, in the booking system, there's a survey before they book. So we just did that. Try and understand what they need, what they want. We talk to them a lot as well. So I think that's really the primary goal. What do we need to do to continue deepening our impact by understanding their needs and serving them more effectively? And we're just doing a lot of little things, right? So, sensory overload is a big thing for our students. how do we help them manage that? Whether it's through, again, executive functions and function training and things like that, whether it's through technology that we can offer them, everything like, things like that. Then training our teachers, what do we train them on? How can we train them better on things that they need? A lot of little things, like one thing, we increased Socratic discussions in our curriculum this year. With AI coming, we think that a stronger emphasis on oral communication, structured thinking, debating is important. So we increased that. So we're working on innovative recruiting methods. So we have teachers submit videos because, again, AI is coming to recruiting. So people can now submit many applications when you're hiring, very customized applications to many companies. So we're asked them to submit videos, and then they are, one cool thing we're doing in recruiting, we're having many, I would say 5 teachers in the same position come into a Zoom room. Instead of having an interview where you'd ask them questions, they collaborate together on solving a simulated real problem. Say we have 3 students with social emotional issues that are refusing to turn on the camera. What do we do? How do we help them? Do we reprimand them and expel them, or do we work with them and nurture them and connect with them? And how do we do that? So, we use collaborative recruiting, things like that. This is what we're going to focus on. Many tiny digital improvements that are addressing our student needs.
And I think that leads into my last question, which is, imagine somebody from a school called you and said, hey, we need to innovate. We need to figure out this business model. What advice would you give them?
That's a great question. I'd say, just circling back to the beginning of our discussion, don't shy away from thinking in business terms. I think that's number one. School choice is a powerful trend. It's here to stay. And our parents are seeing us through this lens of, consumer choice. And they like choice. They like choosing quirky Airbnbs or, cool orange cars, or fun phones. We're in this era of choice everywhere. So we need to lean into that. We need to embrace that. So we start again by listening. What do they really want? What do they want? And what don't they want from what you already offer? That'll help you understand what you can maybe cut away. And you need to read between the lines. There's this quote from Henry Ford that said, if I ask my customers what they wanted, they'd say faster horses. So you need to say, okay, when they say faster horses, what do they really mean? What do they... So that's, that concept of value stream mapping that we discussed earlier. Ask yourself, would they pay for each of the steps I have in my experience, my customer experience? What would they not pay for? And if you start going that way, stripping away things that aren't adding value, freeing up funds, investing those funds in innovation, getting your team on board with this process, you lean into that choice, you find a positioning that works for you and for your families. I think that's at least the advice I can give that's worked for us, and I think is pretty well suited to the time we're in at the moment.
Andreas, if somebody wants to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
My email is easy. It's am@brilliantmicroschool.org. Our website, brilliantmicroschools.org, has a partnerships link there, and anyone want to collaborate on anything, we're happy to hear from them. And we try and do a number of partnerships with different types of education organizations. So those would be the 2 best ways to reach out.
Well, that's fantastic. Andreas, thank you so much for sharing. There's a lot to process here for folks, and I look forward to watching your growth and seeing the impact that you make.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be of support to anyone that we can.